My name is Alana and I am deaf. I was born with a common cavity malformation which resulted in profound hearing loss. At the age of 2.5, I underwent an experimental surgery in Australia. Shortly after my surgery, I learned to hear and speak through auditory verbal therapy. Before I get into more details about my case, I'd like to take a step back and explain the structure of the ear. The physiological structure of the ear is divided into 3 parts: the outer ear, the middle ear, and the inner ear. It connects to the brain via an auditory nerve, which gets interpreted into sound. The outer ear is responsible for collecting sound waves. The middle ear transmits the sound waves from the outer ear to the inner ear. The inner ear is composed of 3 main structures: the vestibule, the semicircular canal, and the cochlea. The cochlea of the inner ear is capable of exceptional sound analysis in terms of both frequency and intensity. The cochlea is the primary organ that affects a person's hearing. It has 2 3/4 turns coiled like a snail shell. When sound enters a person's ear, the sound stimulates the tiny hair cells in the cochlea. The cochlea will then turn the sound electrical signals and pass it to the auditory nerve. The auditory nerve carries electrical signals to the brain, which in turns into sound that we can recognize and understand. If hair cells in the cochlea are damaged, hearing loss will occur. Under normal circumstances, hearing aids could be used to help amplify or increase speech and sounds from the outside world. However, hearing aids can only help up to a certain degree of hearing loss. For those with profound hearing loss, cochlear implants do not cure hearing loss or restore hearing, but they do help people with severe hearing loss perceive the sensation of sound by bypassing the damaged inner ear. Cochlear implants are composed of 2 major parts. The first part is the implant, which includes electrodes and decoding module. The second part is the sound processor, which is composed of the microphone, signal transmitter, and coil. After implantation, it is critical to wear the outer processor daily for sustained function. What made my case of being diagnosed with profound hearing loss unusual is that I have a condition called the common cavity malformation. I do not have any partition in the cochlea, and without this partition, the inner ear structure is disoriented. So a normal cochlear structure actually has 2.5 spiral and a partition running through the middle. My case is a bit more complex and unique because it doesn't have the spiral and it doesn't have the partition. What this means is it's extra difficult to implant the cochlear implant because there's no spiral structure holding the implant in place. So actually I underwent an experimental surgery where the surgeon had to blindly insert the implant into my cochlea, not knowing what the inner shape was or where the nerves were. This was really quite a gamble. So I learned how to listen and speak through a program called Auditory Verbal Therapy, which focuses on training the ear on comprehending and understanding sounds. It's also really helpful in being tailored to each individual person's strengths and weaknesses. For example, my weaknesses are often based on the breathy sounds such as shh, shh, those kind of sounds. So it's important to recognize that when you have profound hearing loss and you're using a cochlear implant such as myself, There is no destination. It is a lifelong training process. I did receive auditory verbal therapy throughout my entire childhood, and I'm still going to continue it throughout my life, because rather than thinking of it as like wearing glasses where you put it on and you're done, it's actually more like a muscle, where if you want to keep that muscle, you've got to train it over and over again. Because my speech is much better than my hearing, so if I want to maintain that, I've got to constantly exercise that muscle. I think it's just going through the process and being able to master sounds that you can't hear. At least that's the most difficult part for me, because how do you explain a sound that someone can't hear? For me personally, it's quite difficult to hear in background noise because I have a microphone and all the sounds go into the microphone, so I can tailor or select unique individual sounds. Rather, I hear everything that goes into the microphone, so I do have to take measures in my life to improve my communication needs. So I'm frequently asked what it's like for me to hear a sound, and this is quite a difficult question for me to answer because, quite frankly, this is all I've known, but I have heard from other people who did have hearing and lost it and received a cochlear implant that some people say it's akin to hearing underwater. Other people have described it as quite muffled. Some others have said it's extremely technical, electrical almost. For me, it just sounds like sound because that's all I know. I often say that you should always be yourself and don't pay attention to a lot of the negative stereotypes. You just treat other people the way that you would want to be treated and make best use of what you have.